Good morning and welcome to this episode of CDA Oasis Live. I'm delighted to welcome back a great friend, Dr. Michael Glogauer, University of Toronto, UHN hospitals in Toronto. And we're going to talk today about an article, let me share my screen, that Michael was one of the authors on. And you can see it here, Journal of Dental Research, very recently published just last week. Periodontal inflammation primes the systemic innate immune response. And you can see Michael is here. He's the corresponding author with lots of well-known people. Michael, what did you investigate and why?
John, thanks for the invitation. So I think that there's a consensus, there's an understanding that there's a link between periodontal disease or oral inflammation and a number of systemic health conditions, whether it be diabetes, development of cancer, heart disease, etc. And so one of the things that we and other labs have been working on is to try to understand what are the possible mechanisms whereby oral inflammation or periodontal disease could actually practically impact on systemic health and other inflammatory conditions. And so what we did was, in my lab, we've spent probably 4 or 5 years working on this paper. There are elements that we've been working on for a very long time. And what we've tried to understand using both a mouse model and a human model for the first time show that oral inflammation in the form of periodontal disease can prime the innate immune system or the white blood cells in circulation. So, you know, in blood, there's white blood cells, red blood cells. And these white blood cells we're showing, one group in particular, are actually primed or partially activated so that when they get a second signal, they're able to act very, very quickly. And so what we've done is we've shown that periodontal disease prime or partially activates these white blood cells so that if there's another problem, so say somebody with periodontal disease has atherosclerosis or is primed or prone to has a cardiovascular issue, their white blood cells are much more sensitive to interact with, say, a plaque on a blood vessel, hypothetically, or a plaque breaks off and gets lodged, some bacteria get into the circulation. These cells are likely to become a little bit more likely to activate and thereby cause problems. And that's what we've been able to show in this work.
So it's like problem in place one can turbocharge white blood cells to accentuate a problem in place two. Is that correct?
Exactly. And so I want to make it clear, we haven't definitively shown, we did not use a heart disease model in a mouse or a human, for example. What we did was, we call it our double hit model. So we induce periodontal disease in a mouse, or we have a control mouse that didn't have periodontal disease. And then what we do is we induce an acute infection. So we induce an infection in the peritoneum, in the peritoneal space. And then we watch over the 24 to 48 hours, we see how the immune system responds to that second hit, which is that infection in the peritoneum. And what we found was that the mouse with periodontal disease, they get a much more exuberant inflammatory response to that infection, and it lasts longer and creates some problems for the animal. So that versus the control mouse sort of had a normal infection and that it resolved normally, which didn't happen in the mouse with periodontal disease. So that was the mouse model aspect. Can we show that cytokines are augmented to a greater extent in the mouse with periodontal disease? And that's likely the mechanism whereby these chemicals that are released by the immune system prime these cells in circulation and make them more likely to cause a problem. So the question is, that's the mouse, but what about the human? How could you study that in a human? So in my lab, we use something called an experimental gingivitis model, where we pay healthy people to not brush their teeth for 2 or 3 weeks. And then what we do is they come in and we collect blood once a week, and we look at their immune response. And we have an assay where what we do is we can take blood from the person, and then we put one of these activators into the blood, and then we look at the response of the white blood cells in the blood. And what we found is when we took blood from the person when they were healthy, we got a normal response. When that same person had periodontal disease, well, actually in the form of gingivitis, we could see a very exuberant response in the neutrophils. And then when they started brushing again, the neutrophils, the white blood cell response went back to normal. So almost identical to what we had seen in the mouse, but in the lab model using human samples. So this is critically important for a couple of reasons. And I think there's a couple of things going on in sort of the world right now related to COVID that sort of highlight the importance of this. And one is, we have a lot of patients who are not coming in, for example, to have their hygiene done. I have a significant number of patients who say, listen, I'm not leaving my house. So a couple of things are happening. One, a subset of these patients are coming back with emergencies. But secondarily, even those who aren't having any emergencies, what this is showing that even gingivitis, even the process of gingivitis can prime the innate immune system to cause potential problems in some groups of patients, whether it be a poorly controlled diabetic, where it's somebody with cardiovascular disease, etc. So we want to make it, I think it highlights the importance of just basic hygiene and the prevention of sort of that initial disease, that initial oral inflammatory response, which is gingivitis, never mind periodontitis. And the second interesting part is that there is work starting to come out now suggesting that those with periodontal disease or a history of periodontal disease may be part of that subgroup of patients who do very poorly when exposed to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And this is coming out of England now. And so the question is, what's going on? And what we showed is that even in the mouse and the humans, that periodontal disease leads to the release of a number of cytokines into the circulation, and that these cytokines are impacting on and signaling and activating the white blood cells in circulation. And in fact, the patients who do quite poorly in COVID, when they're infected with SARS-CoV-2, they're getting something called a cytokine storm, which is the hyperproduction of these cytokines, which leads to sort of the negative outcomes. And we believe that periodontal disease may be sort of it may be the first hit. We talked about the double hit. It may be the first hit, and that second hit of the virus, you have the cytokines produced by the periodontal disease, you have the cytokines that are being released due to the viral infection, and these two may lead to some of the negative outcomes. Now, this needs to be tested, but I think that there's enough data there to suggest that this is a valid hypothesis worthy of testing.
Well, just when you were in an earlier part of what you were saying, I heard cytokines, I heard COVID. I thought immediately cytokine storm. I was wondering where you were going to lead to with that. Michael, where will the research trajectory go from here?
Right. So in my lab, you saw my list of collaborators. So this work is being carried out by all those people who are in my lab, and with my good friend and collaborator, Dr. Tenenbaum, who I talked to a lot about all this work. Our next step is to go into the area of actually taking a mouse that has a mouse-induced cardiovascular disease where we can induce a myocardial infarction, induce a heart attack, and do that in that same mouse that doesn't have periodontal disease or that does have the periodontal disease we induce, and show that the damage caused is increased potentially with the mouse with periodontal disease because the blood cells are primed, etc. So we want to go and really delve into that and really show that, yes, obviously we can prime and it has an effect potentially in a whole bunch of diseases, but we're going to start now focusing on periodontal disease. And we're also going to sort of head into the cancer realm and show that the propensity to develop cancer may be increased in the mice with periodontal disease due to some of these cytokines.
Exciting stuff. And I hope you're getting funding for all of this.
We're always hunting for funding, John.
Michael, to wrap up, do you have any key message for healthcare providers or decision makers in the healthcare area based on this finding?
Right. Well, I think, I really want the message from this paper to get out. The reason I do sort of do an event like this with you is because I need to help translate this knowledge so that my fellow dentists and dental hygienists out there can actually use this knowledge to help in how they manage their patients. And I think I believe that this data is significant enough. It's not just mouse, it's human as well, where we can start, when we're talking to our patients, talk to them that, yeah, you may not be concerned about a little gingivitis, but here's a study that is showing that even gingivitis can induce this priming event in humans to the point where their neutrophils are perhaps ready to sort of give too much of give a hyper exuberant response, an over exuberant response to a second hit, whatever that may be for you, whether it be cardiovascular disease, where it may be some viral infection, etc. So I think it's important that this is important information that we in the healthcare field can use to help our patients understand that oral health optimization, including the elimination of all oral infections, including gingivitis, is critically important to their overall well-being.
Dr. Michael Glogauer, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us today, and we look forward to catching up with you to see where your research endeavors take you.
Great, thanks, John.